What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for April 2nd, 2023. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Few updates before we get into today's episode. Flyers lost 6-3 to the Sabres. They're pretty much firmly right now in that 26th position. There's 7 games left. They're like 3 games ahead of the team below them, 3 games behind the team ahead of them. So they have a tough schedule coming up, including today versus the Penguins, who lost a tough one to the Bruins yesterday. The Penguins are fighting for a playoff spot, so they always play, obviously, too, they always play well against the Flyers, who at this point are eliminated. So hopefully that will allow, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but hopefully that will allow the Penguins to kind of dominate the Flyers and help the cause for trying to get one of those high draft picks. And again, if they are going to fix it, not saying they do, might not be a bad idea. I feel like the NHL is probably the Flyers are like a villain, so it's almost like they need the Flyers to get a little bit better, help maybe take the torch from Pittsburgh and Sydney. I don't know. We'll see. But Flyers Penguins this afternoon. Union played to a 0-0 draw against Sporting KC. Still early in their season, so lots of time left for them to get back. Phillies, I don't know if it's time to panic yet. I know we're 2 games in, but starting pitching is not looking good. The bullpen got roughed up yesterday. You had position players pitching. And it's a shame. They got off to that slow start, battled back on offense, and I think they're going to be all right scoring. But, man, what I thought was going to be the strength has been the biggest weakness so far of the season. They're in action tonight in primetime. Hopefully Bailey Falter can get it done. I don't know. Wasn't expecting Nola and Wheeler to look that bad. So it's not quite time for concern yet, but we're on notice. And speaking of on notice, Sixers playing the Bucks tonight. This is one of those games where I would like to see Doc come out and coach very, very well. I know he's been doing well recently, but this is kind of one of those measuring stick games which both teams should be fully healthy heading in. Or I shouldn't say fully healthy, but as healthy as they could be. I just want to see them just come out and just dominate the way they have been against some of these other teams against a team like the Bucks. And the Sixers always do play well against the Bucks, so that'll be a fun game to watch tonight. Lots going on tonight, actually, between the Sixers, Bucks, Phillies, Rangers, WrestleMania Day 2. So it's going to be a late night, but that's okay because we're on spring break and we don't have to worry about getting up for work tomorrow. All right. So today, we're going to keep it with the Phillies. We're going to go back to 1992. And on April 2nd, 1992, the Phillies made a trade. They traded Jason Grimsley to the Astros for Curt Schilling. Now, at the time, it was kind of like Grimsley came in, if you kind of remember back, he had all this hype and was supposed to be the next big thing. Didn't necessarily pan out the way they thought. Curt Schilling had struggled with the Orioles and the Astros, and it was kind of one of those things. Maybe both of these guys needed a change of scenery. Well, it worked out very, very well for the Phillies, I would say. Once he was able to get into that starting rotation, even though they were a bad team, and consistently get his starts and throw. Schilling had a decent 1992 season, but we know in 1993 is when he came in and just was the ace of that team, even though Mulholland, I think, technically started the beginning of the season as the number 1. But, he rolled through that postseason with a 2.59 ERA. Everybody probably remembers Game 5 of the 93 World Series. It was must-win. He came out and just dominated. Pretty big, clutch, big game pitcher. We didn't know it at the time, but that in 1993, we knew the best was yet to come for him, where he had the bloody sock game for the Red Sox, won a World Series in Arizona with Randy Johnson. He was the MVP of that 2001 World Series. So this was kind of the start early in his career, that 93 Game 5 of just him being a big game pitcher. But overall, in his years with the Phillies, he went 101 and 78, 3.35 ERA, 61 complete games, and 1,554 strikeouts. Not bad for a guy that was basically like, all right, let's just make a trade here. Say what you want about him. He's gotten a little kooky, I guess you could call him, in recent years with some of his beliefs, and I don't want to get into specifics and political, but some of his ideas are kind of out there, and I know people have used that against him when it comes to this argument, which I don't understand, and maybe we can get into that one day this summer when things slow down. But for the Hall of Fame, who cares what a guy does after his career? It's kind of one of those things, like that should be completely separated, but they take the whole thing into consideration. And again, say what you want. For me, he's a Hall of Famer. I feel one of the best big game pitchers there ever was. I mean, you look at it, whether or not like the bloody sock thing was fake or not, doesn't matter. I mean, obviously he was hurt, but I mean, he just came out, whatever's going to motivate him, that's fine. He came out and did what he had to do when he needed to do it. So on this date, the Phillies traded Jason Grimsley for Curt Schilling, and a move that worked out well for the Phillies. Curt actually would go on to have probably bigger success elsewhere just because he did win the 3 World Series titles, but sort of cut his teeth, I guess you could say, and really learned how to pitch in big games in that 93 playoff run. Also, in case you're wondering, Jason Grimsley didn't turn out to live up to all the hype that he was supposed to, but he was pretty serviceable. He's a 2-time World Series champion, spent 15 years in the majors, just kind of one of those guys. I think he was a starter, but he ended up being a reliever late in his career. So overall, I think it worked out well for the Phils, though, on this day when they traded the Astros, Jason Grimsley, for Curt Schilling. All right. As I mentioned yesterday, we're going to do a daily Eagles draft pick spotlight. The NFL draft is later this month, April 27th through the 29th. More on that to come on Back to the Future. And speaking of Back to the Future, be sure to check out the latest episode where we interviewed Mary Beth Freeman, one of the best field hockey players and coaches to come out of the area. Great listen. Be sure to check it out, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. But today's draft pick spotlight, we're going to do Keith Byars. The Dayton, Ohio native was picked 10th overall in the 1986 draft by the Eagles. He was a running back who also then shifted and played some time at tight end for the Eagles as well as a couple other NFL teams. He did finish, and this is the thing I think some people forget about Keith Byars. He finished second in the Heisman in 1984 behind Doug Flutie, and came in as the favorite to win the Heisman in 1985, but fractured his foot early in that season and never really got going. I think he re-injured it again in one of the bowl games, or I forget which bowl game it was, but I think Ohio State, whatever bowl game they played in, he got hurt again. But he ended up his college career with over 4,000 total yards, 50 touchdowns, which I think is still first or second in Ohio State history. Played for the Eagles from 86 to 92, and it was a solid player. I mean, I think the expectations were higher because he had that pedigree of being second in the Heisman, and they hoped that he was able to come back from those injuries, which essentially he did, just not to the level of running back I think that the Eagles expected him to. And so I always look at Keith Byars as one of those guys that they always expect it to be, that like they always needed a running back during that time period. So Keith Byars was always that guy that, or the first in the line of those guys that were supposed to be the answer. But he was a good blocker, great blocker, good receiver. Like I said, he played some tight end. He did have over 2,600 rushing yards, but he had 5,600 total yards with the Eagles. But again, he was like a Mr. Versatile kind of guy. Ended up going to the Dolphins, played for the Patriots and the Jets. Bill Parcells loved this dude, so he kind of followed Parcells there later in his career. If you want to do yourself a favor, go on YouTube and look up Keith Byars block on Pepper Johnson. And this just shows you, one, how different the game was back then, and two, just how much of a gamer Keith Byars was. Randall was going on a run. and cut around the corner and point it basically to Pepper Johnson. And all of a sudden, like, you see it like out of nowhere, like the bottom of the screen, Pepper Johnson flies like 2 or 3 yards, and they show some different angles of it, but he was a beast. And I think once he realized he was never going to be that running back he was in college, he really hit the weights and became, to me, one of the best blockers I've ever seen, especially as a running back. But like I said, do yourself a favor, look up the block on Pepper Johnson. Holy shit. But all right, so today's spotlight, we did talk about Keith Byars, who was drafted 10th in 1986 by the Eagles. Don't forget the NFL draft is coming up later this month. It's going to be a big one for the Eagles with 2 first-round picks and some needs that they have to get filled. So anxious to see, do they go running back? I don't know. But hopefully the Phillies can get it together and salvage a game out there in Texas. Hopefully the Sixers come out and play well tonight. Let's hope that the Flyers also lose to the Penguins. 1, because I bet the Penguins on the puck line, and 2, we need the game for the draft picks. So on this day in 1992, the Eagles traded for Curt Schilling in a move that paid off pretty well for him. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History. Go have yourselves a Sunday. I'm Jim Montgomery, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.